Hey everyone, I'm Pat Fitzmaurice, managing editor of Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros, and I'm going to run through my favorite Week 14 NFL player props in just a minute, but not before I give you a chance to win something cool. If you want to win a signed Isaiah McKenzie mini helmet, courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, you need to subscribe to the Betting Pros YouTube channel right now, comment below on this video, and that's it. We will be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications to be alerted to when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. All right, let's get to Week 14 and the props. There's a limited menu this week, 6 teams on bye, another bye-apocalypse for us here, so that's okay. We don't need a cheesecake-sized menu, Cheesecake Factory-sized menu every week. We'll make do with this smaller slate. And by the way, we've been pretty hot lately. Last 2 weeks, 11-3. So yeah, after stumbling around for some of the earlier part of the season and struggling to stay ahead of the juice, we've been doing okay lately. So let's see if we can keep the momentum going. And we're going to start with some passing props. I like Josh Allen under 256.5 passing yards this week against the Jets. No, betting the under on Josh Allen passing yardage does not necessarily feel good, but Allen has fallen short of this number in 3 straight games and 5 of his last 6. And he's got a really tough matchup with the Jets, one of the best passing defenses in the league. Jets are giving up just 194.3 passing yards per game and 5.8 yards per pass attempt. Both of those marks are the 4th best in the league. And in an earlier meeting with the Jets this season, back in Week 9, Allen completed 18 of 34 passes for 205 passing yards with no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He averaged just 6.03 yards per attempt that game. And in fact, over the last 5 games, Josh Allen has averaged no better than 7.67 yards per pass attempt in any games. He has not been hyper efficient lately. Last thing to mention, the forecast in Buffalo for this Sunday, as you might expect, not great weather in Buffalo in December. Calling for a mix of rain and snow, not necessarily going to be any sort of weather wipeout for the quarterbacks in this one, but passing conditions could be suboptimal. I like Josh Allen under 256.5 passing yards. I also like Joe Burrow over 278.5 passing yards. Yes, that's kind of a high bar to clear, but Burrow has been absolutely lethal at home this season in Cincinnati's Paycor Stadium. He has topped this number, 278.5 passing yards, in 4 of 5 home games this year, averaging 319.6 passing yards in those 5 home games. And he's going against the Browns this week. When these two teams last played, the Browns embarrassed the Bengals 32-13 on Halloween night. You might remember that. It was a Monday night home game, and the Bengals could not get much cooking on offense. Burrow threw for only 232 yards in that game, but he was, of course, without Jamar Chase, who was still dealing with a hip injury. Chase is now back, giving Burrow a full complement of wide receivers. It's Chase, it's T. Higgins, it's Tyler Boyd. The Browns, meanwhile, could be without cornerback Denzel Ward, who has been dealing with an illness and an ankle injury. So I like Burrow over 278.5 passing yards. One more passing prop. 6 player props, and 3 of them are pertaining to passing yardage this week. And this might be my favorite of all, Deshaun Watson under 225.5 passing yards. There was a thick coat of rust on Deshaun Watson last week in his first game back from suspension. And it was his first regular season action since January 3rd, 2021. That's 23 months, almost 2 full years. So I guess the rust was somewhat understandable. Watson completed 12 of 22 passes against the Texans for 131 yards with no touchdowns and 1 interception. His average depth of targets on his throws in that game was just 6.3 yards. And the Bills had 38 rushing attempts versus 22 passing attempts. Now, granted, 7 of those runs were Deshaun Watson runs, so some were dropbacks where he scrambled out. But needless to say, the Browns approach was run heavy, and I think maybe they go run heavy again this week against the Bengals in an effort to lighten the load on their rusty quarterback. It kind of makes sense. Watson is up against a pretty good Bengals pass defense this week that ranks 10th in Football Outsiders DVOA metric against the pass. And they're also 11th in pressure rate. It's a good defense. Watson is rusty. I do not expect him to light it up this week. I think he's going to be under 225.5 passing yards. I will get to my three remaining selections in just a moment. But first, do you want to track all of your wagers in one place? Check out the Betting Pros Pick Tracker at bettingpros.com/pick-tracking. It syncs up with your sportsbooks to tally which picks hit and which ones miss. And it gives you a live look at what the public is doing, so you can use real-time tracking to determine which plays to make and which ones to fade. Get on the leaderboard and quickly become a sharp by using the free advice we have to offer at bettingpros.com/pick-tracking. All right, let's get to the last three player props for the week. Saquon Barkley under 71.5 rushing yards. If you'll recall from last week, I was also on the Saquon Barkley under for rushing yardage last week. It successfully hit. We're going back to the well again this week. The Giants' running game has been struggling for the last month, really. Like, Barkley has failed to hit this number in 3 consecutive games and in 4 of his last 5. Since week 8, Barkley is averaging 3.3 yards per carry, and he has a week 14 game against the Eagles. And I'm not going to say the Eagles are great against the run. They've been average to maybe slightly below average this season, but Philly did manage to hold Derrick Henry, the Titans' do-everything running back last week, to 30 rushing yards on 11 attempts. I think Saquon Barkley is going to be well under 71.5 rushing yards this week. All right, that's a lot of unders so far. 3 out of the 4 picks, unders so far. We got to get some overs in here. So we'll start with a Garrett Wilson over. Garrett Wilson over 61.5 receiving yards. This number is simply too low for an ascendant star. And Garrett Wilson just looks so good. Wilson had 5 catches for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Bears in week 12. And then he exploded last week for 8 catches and 162 yards against the Vikings. In the 5 games this season where the Jets have started either Joe Flacco or Mike White at quarterback, i.e., not Zach Wilson, Garrett Wilson is averaging 11.2 targets in those 5 games, 6.2 catches, and 94.2 receiving yards. Put in anyone except Zach Wilson at quarterback for the Jets, and Garrett Wilson is going to produce. The Bills are the Jets' opponents this week, and while they would seem to be a difficult matchup, Buffalo has given up the 14th most receiving yards to wide receivers this season. So more of a neutral matchup against wide receivers, not one to fear. Garrett Wilson over 61.5 receiving yards. And finally, Greg Dulcich, the rookie tight end for the Broncos, over 39.5 receiving yards. Dulcich has topped this number in 4 of the 7 games he's played this season. He's coming off a 6-catch, 85-yard performance against the Ravens, in which Dulcich had a 36.3% target share. Now, we saw Cortland Sutton leave that game early for the Broncos with a hamstring injury, which perhaps contributed to Dulcich's enhanced target share. Well, it looks like Sutton is going to be out again this week. He's considered doubtful with that hamstring injury, so that does enhance the target outlook for Dulcich yet again. And the matchup against the Chiefs wouldn't seem especially appealing on the surface. Kansas City is just sort of middle of the pack in terms of receiving yardage allowed to tight end. But the Chiefs do sometimes give up plays, big plays to tight ends. Dulcich has been kind of a big play tight end this year. Since week 7, Kansas City has allowed the 3rd highest yards per reception to opposing tight ends. So, all right, let's recap the 6 selections for this week. We like Josh Allen under 256.5 passing yards. Joe Burrow over 278.5 passing yards. Deshaun Watson under 225.5 passing yards. Saquon Barkley under 71.5 rushing yards. Garrett Wilson over 61.5 receiving yards, and Greg Dulcich over 39.5 receiving yards. So that's it. Let's see if we can keep it rolling in week 14. My friends, good luck with all of your wagers this week. May it be a profitable weekend for you. We'll talk to you again soon.